Hi, my name is Yael. I'm in the payments team over at Wix. We're very, very glad that you're here and welcome to the webinar. We're really excited to introduce you to the world of Wix Studio, the web creation platform built for agencies and freelancers where you can deliver exceptional, high-quality sites in the most efficient way. The platform was designed with you in mind, covering many layers of creating and managing multiple projects while still maintaining quality. Today, we're specifically going to talk about designing. I'm inventing words. Today, we're going to talk about designing with performance in mind with one of our very own performance operations managers, Rotem Janovic, who's here with us. But before we get started, there's some specific things I do want to bring up with you guys. First, we're going to manage the questions and comments differently, okay? So if you have a comment, something that ends with a period is the best way to say it, that you can stick in the chat where you guys have already been putting in where you're from and what time it is in your time zone. Now, if you have a question for the team that you would like answered, we have a Q&A box. And so there, you're going to stick in your question, and as we go through the webinar, we'll do our best to address them, okay? Now, without further ado, have I covered everything before we're done? We did the Q&A and the chat box. I think we are all set. Rotem, how are you doing over there?
Hey, Yael, thank you. I'm doing great. I will start with a small apology if you've already asked how I am. I'm a tiny bit sick, so I'm going to take a sip from my tea here and there, so be patient with me. I'll introduce myself again. Like you've mentioned, I'm the operations manager in Wix's performance team. And today we'll be talking about designing a Wix site with performance in mind. So let's jump to it, and here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll start with a quick reminder on what core vitals are. We'll then discuss their use in field and lab data, what these are, and what is the difference between the two. We'll move on to learn about the different performance testing tools available to you and dive into the capabilities and advantages of each tool. Next, we'll take a look at Wix's progress in these fields and how it is doing compared to the competition and to the internet as a whole. And lastly, we will go over some best practices, tips you can use right away to improve the performance of your existing sites and to keep in mind when creating new ones. We'll finish, of course, with some time for questions. All right, so let's start with the basics and try to define performance. The performance of a web page is a reflection of the experience a visitor is having when loading and interacting with it. There are lots of metrics out there that are trying to encapsulate this experience, but there are 3 metrics that were introduced recently by Google and became an industry standard for measuring performance. They are called the core web vitals, and we'll focus on them. So each core web vital is aiming to assess a different aspect in the visitor's experience. First, we have LCP, which stands for Largest Contentful Paint. This core web vital is used for measuring the loading time of a web page by checking how long it took its largest element to load. Next, we have FID, First Input Delay. FID is measuring the interactivity of a page, or how fast it took it to respond to the first interaction by the user. This core vital is going to be replaced soon by a different one called INP that is also measuring interactivity in a slightly different way. I'll elaborate about it in a bit. But lastly, we have CLS. CLS stands for Cumulative Layout Shift. As the name suggests, this core vital is measuring the amount of layout shifts our page has while it is loading, or in other words, how visually stable it is while loading. So let's dive into each core vital, starting with LCP. As we've mentioned, LCP is measuring the loading time of a page by reporting the time it took the largest image or text element on it to render. Our web page will get a good LCP score if the largest contentful paint was rendered under 2.5 seconds. By the way, when I say largest, I mean the largest element in terms of dimensions, of size. Google assumes that the largest element will be a meaningful one, and thus a good representation of how long it took the page to render in a way that is that the visitor can consume it. Let's take a look at this example here. We can see a CNN page being loaded on a mobile device. At first, a small text element is being loaded on the header of the page, and it becomes the LCP candidate, since it is currently the largest element on the page. Half a second later, a larger text element is loaded instead, which takes the place of the previous LCP candidate. Then on the 2.5 second mark, when the page has finished loading, an even larger image appears, which becomes our largest contentful paint. The LCP score in this example would be 2.5 seconds, which is just in the green area. If you look at the bar here on the left, 2.5 seconds, because this is the time it took for this image to load. It is important to mention that the LCP is only measured on the first fold of a page, and that there's no one LCP element per page, but rather per session. For example, if I'm browsing a page from a mobile device, the largest element can be different from the one I'll get if I browse the exact same page from my laptop. Cool, so that was LCP, and let's move to our next core vital, the FID. FID, which stands for first input delay, is measuring the interactivity of a page by timing how long it takes it to respond to the visitor's first interaction. This interaction can be a click on a button, a tap on a link, and so on. If the page responds to this first interaction under 100 milliseconds, we'll get a good score, a green one. Anything over 300 milliseconds is considered bad. Google announced that in March of 2024, FID is going to be replaced with a new core vital called INP. INP is also measuring interactivity, but in a slightly different way. Instead of measuring the response time to the first interaction, like FID does, it is measuring all of the interaction a visitor is having with the page, and the INP score will be based on the longest response time among them. So if FID is like clicking on a single button and checking how long it takes it to respond, INP is like clicking on all of the buttons and measuring which one takes the longest to respond. A good INP score would be under 200 milliseconds of response time. It is also important to mention that INP does not have an impact on your site's performance score until it will officially replace FID, and we're focused on further improving the INP score of Wix sites before it does. All right, so let's move on to our last core vital, the CLS. You know how you sometimes browse a web page, a blog post, for example, and while it is still loading, you start reading it, right? And then suddenly something shifts. The text you've been reading moves around and you lose your place. Alternatively, like in this amusing example, you're just about to click on a button and a layout shift occurs. Some kind of ad or something pops up and it is pushing the button you're just about to click, and you end up buying 56 items you don't need. So these are examples of poor visitor experiences that are the result of layout shifts. CLS, or cumulative layout shift, is a metric that measures if such a layout shift occurred and how severe they are. By doing so, it is assessing the visual stability of a page. So ideally, a page should have a CLS score of 0, meaning it has no layout shifts at all while it is loading. Anything over 0.25 is considered bad. So keep in mind, and that applies to all core vitals, that each time you're browsing a web page, you might get different core vital measurements. Again, this applies to all core vitals and not only to CLS. The very fact that some elements of a page are already cached on your browser, for example, or on the host server, for example, or that you got a specific ad on this session instead of a different one, this can have impact on the core vitals of that specific session on that specific time you've loaded the page. Also, obviously, how strong your internet connection is and how powerful your device is can have crucial impact on the performance of web pages. So browsing the exact same page from two different geolocation or two different devices can report completely different core web vitals. I hope this helped refresh your memory about core vitals, and let's move on to our next topic, which would be field and lab data. All right. Now, all these metrics we've just discussed are designed to measure the experience real visitors are having when browsing a web page, and they do a great job doing it. There are resources out there that, using these core vitals, let you see your site's field data, how real visitors are experiencing your web page. One such resource is the Chrome UX report, abbreviated as CRUX. CRUX is a publicly available database supported by Google, where the core vitals of Chrome browser sessions are collected. You know how when you install Chrome, you're being asked about your data collection settings, like what kind of data do you agree that Google will save? So the core vitals of pages you're visiting is most likely one of them. Then site owners, as yourself, can use CRUX or similar databases to determine how real visitors experienced your sites. And we, as a platform, Wix, can use it to get an aggregated view of how sites created on Wix are performing. We'll take a look at that also in a bit. So this kind of data is referred to as field data, data from real visitors, from real browser sessions. But at this point, you might ask yourself, that's all good and well, but what if I want to assess the performance of a site before I'm driving traffic to it? I want to understand how it performs while I'm building and designing it. So this is where lab data comes in. Lab data is an estimation of the performance of a web page, an assessment or scoring created by measuring real visitors' experience, but by testing the page in a simulated environment. Basically, an algorithm is reviewing a web page and is trying to estimate what the experience of a real visitor would be. There are various testing tools out there that offer such an estimation. You most likely type in your page's URL, and in return, you get a performance score between 1 to 100, broken down to specific metrics, similar to the core vitals that we've discussed. You also usually get a list of opportunities and tips on how to improve that scoring. So the most famous such lab testing tool is probably Google Lighthouse. You might have heard of it. We'll talk about it more in a bit. So we have field data on the one hand, data from real visitors who browse your site, assuming that you have enough of them. And we have lab data on the other hand, an algorithm that is trying to assess how visitors will experience your site using a simulation. It is important to understand the differences between these two ways of assessing the performance of your site and knowing which one you should use and when. Lab testing tools should be used mostly for finding opportunities, which these tools usually offer. And also for measuring changes. You can, for example, make changes to your page's design and use such tools after each such change and get an understanding of how it affected your page performance. We'll show such an example in chapter 5 of this webinar. But as I've mentioned, another use of lab tests is when you simply don't have enough real traffic to your site, like in the process of building a new one, but you still want to get an understanding of how real visitors will eventually experience it. You'll only have lab testing tools to do that. Another important nuance between the two is that lab scores are blind to who your real visitors are. Field data is not. If we take two sites, the first is targeting a first world country as its audience, and the second site is targeting a third world country. So the field data of the first site will be much better because of the internet connectivity and superior devices that are used by its visitors. This important information that, again, you can only get from field data lets you make educated decisions on the way you build and design your site. Maybe aiming for linear and thus faster sites that target audiences with slower internet speed, for example. Lastly, and most importantly, field data is what counts for SEO boosts. As some of you probably know, Google has confirmed that performance is one of the criteria that are taken into Google's SEO algorithm. However, in this, it is the experience that real visitors are having, the field data of a website, that is taking into this consideration, and not the score it is getting on Lighthouse or other such testing tools. So, to summarize, when you have enough traffic, use field data as your performance indicator. It better represents your visitor experience. Great. So now that we've covered this, let's move on and talk about performance testing tools and how you can use them to gain insights and improve the performance of your site. So what we'll do is take a glimpse at two tools. One is Google's Page Speed Insights, and the other is our very own Site Speed Dashboard. Both tools are offering valuable information about your site's performance, such as field and lab data we've just discussed, along with customized tips and other cool features. I encourage you to go over it with me. Go to PageSpeed Insights. You can simply Google it or go to pagespeed.web.dev. And also on a different tab, open your Wix Sites dashboard so we can review both together. I'll give you a few seconds so you can open it. And take another sip of tea. All right. Cool, I hope you have it open. So let's start with PageSpeed Insights. This is how the tool looks like. You have this bar on the top where you type in your web page URL and click Analyze. Keep in mind that the analysis is per URL, per page, and not per site, unless you change the tab here to Origin. The default will be this URL. We also have here a selection between two ways of testing your site, on mobile or on desktop. Note how the default setting is set to mobile, and this is for two reasons. First is that most traffic on the internet these days is coming from mobile devices, which makes it more relevant. And the second is that mobile devices tend to be weaker than desktops, and the internet connection tend to be slower. So it is harder to get good mobile performance, unlike desktop. And in most cases, if you have good performance on mobile, you'll probably also have it on desktop, but not necessarily the other way around. So it is worth focusing on mobile. All right, so let's take a look at the first section here under Discover what real users are experiencing. As the title suggests, this section is showing us the field data of our web page. This data is taken from Crux database, the Chrome User Experience Report, and it is based on sessions from the last 28 days. We can see here that the site I was testing is passing all three core vitals. LCP with a score of 1.5 seconds, first input delay with 11 milliseconds, and CLS with a score of nearly 0, which means that real visitors to this page, on average, got the largest contentful pane to load after 1.5 seconds, got to interact with the page after 11 milliseconds, and virtually got no layout shifts, which is great. Below, you can see some more metrics or web vitals. These are additional metrics we can look at, but they are not considered core web vitals. This is the differentiation. So we can see here FCP, first contentful delay, which is LCP's little brother. And we can see here the INP that we've discussed and more. It is important to note that this is an aggregated view of all Chrome sessions to your website to your web page, in the last 28 days. And you cannot break it down here to specific days. Now, you need to take into account that you'll only see this field data section here under the discover what your real users are experiencing title, if your page has enough traffic to pass a certain threshold. If you do not have it, this is what you'll see when running a test. You'll either see simply no data indication here on the right, or alternatively, if your page doesn't have enough traffic, but your site as a whole does, you'll see that this URL tab is grayed out, and instead you're being redirected to the origin tab, which shows you an aggregated field data of all the pages on your entire site combined, and not the result of a specific URL that you typed. Now, if we scroll a bit down, you'll see this second section titled Diagnose Performance Issues. This is the web page's lab score or lab data. Okay, again, lab score or lab data. Above it was field. Now we're talking about the lab score. What you see here is the output of a tool called Google Lighthouse. We've mentioned it. And Lighthouse is basically trying to simulate how a real visitor will experience your page and quantify it with various metrics. So if you take a look down here, you can see that Google Lighthouse is simulating how your page should load on a Motorola Moto G Power mobile device that is using a slow 4G internet connection. This brings me to a previous point that this kind of lab testing doesn't necessarily reflect the experience your site's average user is having. So here is it in Israel, for example, most people have mobile devices that are stronger than this and have a 5G internet connection. So if I was the average Israeli online business owner, these results won't necessarily reflect how my real visitors experience my site, which is also why field data is the most reliable metric for that. Based on this simulation, Lighthouse provides me with an overall performance score between 1 to 100. In this example, we got 80. It consists of several metrics, two core vitals that we're already familiar with, CLS and LCP, and 3 additional ones. I won't dive into each metric, but note that since interactivity is hard to measure using a simulated test, Lighthouse is not using FID or INP, but rather synthetic metrics such as TBT and speed index that you can see here. One last thing is that is important to keep in mind is that the result of lab testing and especially Lighthouse are very volatile. I can rerun the exact same URL on PageSpeed Insights, second apart, and without making any changes to my page, and get 80 on the first run and 60 on the second run. So when you're testing your page, assuming that you are trying to use lab scores as an indication to the performance of your site, I suggest running it a few times and taking the median score as an indicator to try and mitigate this volatility. So further below on PageSpeed Insights, the third section of this page, you'll find here opportunities and diagnostics that the tool suggests you to implement to your site to improve its performance. You can utilize this section to understand the impact your custom code has on your performance, for example, the impact of third-party apps and extensions you've added, learn more about your site's LCP, or what it most likely be, and much more. So there can definitely be some useful tips here in this section, and I do recommend reviewing these suggestions and learning more about each, but please keep in mind that not everything here is under your control. Some of these suggestions are on us as your site's platform and hosting, and that you cannot affect. I can assure that we are well aware of every such opportunity and working hard to improve in those fields. All right, so this was Google PageSpeed Insights. Now, let's move on to our in-house performance testing tools, which is the site speed dashboard. So you get to this page by clicking on the Analytics and Reports menu in your site's dashboard, and then clicking on Site Speed. If you haven't got a chance to open it yet, feel free to do it now. Take a seat. And let's start with this first section titled Real Visitors Experience. You've probably guessed right by at this point that this is showing you your site's field data. So unlike PageSpeed Insights, here you don't see an aggregated core vitals of the last 28 days, but rather the last 30 days, each day on its own in these columns here. Take a look here, for example, on the right. If you want to know what the LCP of your homepage was on the 30th of August, we can simply look at this bar and see that it was around 1.7 seconds. Pretty good. You can also, on your end, you can also hover it to see the exact number. This lets you make changes to your site and see on a daily intervals how they affect its performance. This isn't possible with PageSpeed Insights. You can do that with every core provider, by the way, if you're simply clicking on the different tabs here. Now it's marked with the LCP is marked. You can move to FID or CLS. Also on the right, you'll see the LCP of each one of your site's pages listed in a descending order based on their traffic. Keep in mind that this field data here is collected by us, by Wix. So unlike PageSpeed Insights, which is based on cracks, the threshold for looking at real traffic here is much, much lower. This means that it is very likely that if you don't have enough traffic to review your field data on PageSpeed Insights, you will still be able to see it here. Cool. So if we go further down the page, we'll see some more useful information. First, we have this cool feature here on the right, showing the core vital distribution among visitors. You can use it to learn how many of them got good scoring versus fair or poor. Next, we have customized tips per core vital. Changing the tabs that we saw above will also change these tips based on your selection. We'll go over some of these tips. So up until now, we were looking at field data. But here on the bottom, we have Lighthouse integrated inside your site speed dashboard. It is showing you lab data as well. So we're familiar with it from PageSpeed Insights. You can see here the different metrics and an overall score at the bottom. A cool thing that you have here, though, and not on Google PageSpeed Insights, is that we keep your lab test history in a list. So you can review your progress over time by simply clicking on the View Test History button here on the bottom. And lastly, on the right here, you have some frequently asked questions, but I'm sure that you know all the answers after this webinar. I do encourage you to check both the SiteSpeed dashboard and the Google PageSpeed Insights periodically. They complement one another, and they will allow you to understand how your visitors experience your site and look for opportunities to improve them. All right, so off to our next topic. We'll take a look at how Wix's performance looks like as a platform. Clear. Let's start off with the median Lighthouse scores of sites that were created on Wix, comparing them to all of the internet combined, which is represented here in blue, along with some top competitors in the bars below. It is important to mention that the graphs I'm about to show you are taken from a publicly available report by Google and HTTP Archive, and it is based on cracks. So When it comes to median lighthouse score, the median Wix site is scoring somewhere around 53, while the median sites across the entire internet is scoring around 39. Not too bad. Also, I think that shows that it is very challenging to get a good lighthouse score on mobile, on all platforms, especially because, like we've mentioned, it is simulating a weak mobile device on a slow internet connection. Next, let's take a look at some field data. Here in this graph, we can see how many sessions across all geolocations got a passing score, a green one, for all 3 core vitals. So when visiting sites that were created on Wix, 55% of the sessions got green core vitals for all 3. We can also see that the aggregated number for all sites across the entire internet is 42. Moving forward here, if we're focusing on a specific geolocation, the United States in this example, we can see that Wix is on the top with 72% of Wix sites passing all 3 core vitals, compared to 51 for the entire internet. Feel free to Google the Core Vital Technology report where this information is taken from to take a look for yourself. And if you're not from the US, look at how Wix is doing in your own country. By the way, you'll also be surprised to see the difference that the technical environment of the visitors can make on the field data. Take a look at Wix's line here in yellow. Personally, as part of the performance team, I do feel proud seeing how we climbed from the very bottom around 3 years ago to where we are today. We're working out to keep this trend and to be the #1 platform when it comes to site performance. So I want to shortly go over a few examples of things that we're doing and that you get right out of the box for your site and helped us get to where we are today in both field and lab data. First of all Wix sites are stored on various data centers across the world and are utilizing a CDN to deliver the site to all visitors as fast as possible, regardless of their geolocation. These CDNs serve cached versions of the site, reducing rendering time. Also, all media uploaded to our platform is optimized, compressed, and transformed to modern image formats such as WebP. We're also identifying and prioritizing elements inside the first fold of the site so that when they load, so when the page loads, you'll first see them prioritized and the LCP content will also be prioritized. This will improve LCP score. And we're working hard on making our code as lean and efficient as possible to reduce thread blocking, which negatively impacts performance. This is just a partial list, but I did want to show you a glimpse of our team's efforts. But now let's move on to the interesting part, which is learning what you can do to improve the performance of your existing sites and things to keep in mind when designing new ones. Here's what we'll cover. Take a look. Just please keep in mind that all of this information can also be found in our knowledge base with walkthroughs and examples. So if you're not sure you understand one of the tips, you can find more detailed information there. Let's dive into the first one, the first tip, which is understanding your site's LCP. My first suggestion, where it is possible, is that you might want to aim for text-based LCP, meaning that the largest element on your site will be a text element. Text tend to load faster than images. So if the largest element on your page in dimensions will be a text element, your LCP score will probably be better than if it was an image. If your LCP is indeed a text element, you might want to enable our new font display swap feature. If you're using a custom font for your text, then this feature tells the browser not to wait until the custom font is fully downloaded to render the text, but instead it renders it as soon as possible using a system font, one that is already saved on the visitor device. And when the custom font is ready, it swaps the text back to it. This also can have really good, amazing impact on LCP, and we'll see an example in a bit. And lastly, it is very important not to animate your LCP element. Animations only play once the site is fully downloaded. So if you animate your LCP element, you're basically making it load less after every other element on your page. So animating your LCP with a fading effect, for example, will harm your LCP score. Before moving forward, just remember, it's true that the largest element is being measured for LCP and only it. But you still want other content on the page to load faster for better visitor experience. Don't fixate on improving the loading time of the LCP element alone. Using animations right and utilizing font display swap, for example, can improve the loading time of all of the elements on your page and thus creating better visitor experience. Cool. So next up, we have proper use of media. I've mentioned before that Wix is compressing your uploaded media and automatically converts it to the WebP format, which is much more efficient than JPG and PNG. However, uploading light and efficient media files will result in lighter files on your site. So it is also important what you're uploading. So for this reason, you should prioritize the lighter JPG format where possible over the heavier PNG format. Unless you really need to use a transparent background, you should prioritize using videos over GIFs. And when uploading custom font files, try to get them in a WOF2 format, as it is lighter and more efficient. So let's take a break here and demonstrate how these two practices can make an impact on performance. I've built a very simple mobile page. Let's troubleshoot it together and run it on Lighthouse over and over again, focusing on its LCP score. We can see that in this starting point, I'm getting an overall score of 50 for this page with an LCP score of 9 seconds. Not too great. Take a look here on the right on how the page looks like while it is loading. And you can see that this page is not following the best practices that we've learned. The major thing that pops right away is that the LCP element, which is the image in this example, has a fade-in animation, which is not great. I'm utilizing here the LCP section in Google Basic Insights to see what the LCP was in this session, and it is indeed that image. Okay, so you can see the type. This is under the diagnostic section under largest contentful paint. We can see what is the LCP in this particular session. So let's see how removing the animation effect will affect our LCP score. So after removing the fading animation, we can see that the LCP score went down by a full 3 seconds, which is a third. Pretty great. You can also see that the overall score went up from 50 to 60. Next, let's utilize another tip that we've covered, which is to use a JPG image instead of a PNG one. My image here was a PNG image originally. Makes sense because it has a transparent background. But since the background of this page has a solid color, what I did was to change the background of the image to that very same color, making it look like the image has a transparent background as well. So with this small tip, I could basically upload a JPG image instead of the PNG one. And as you can see, this change brought me another 1.5 seconds reduction in the LCP score and improved my overall score by 4 more points, just from changing the image format. Next, I would like to change my largest contentful paint, the LCP, to a text element and not an image one. Okay. So As we've mentioned, text elements tend to be lighter and thus load faster, improving LCP score. So I've slightly redesigned my page so that the text is bigger in dimensions than the image. My design might not look great, but I'm positive that you can do a better job than I can in this area. But as you can see, now that the LCP is a text element, it loads a second faster than the image did, getting our LCP score down to 3.6 seconds and our general score to 71. Making progress. All right, and you can also, again, see how changing the size of the text element changed it to be the LCP element, the largest contentful paint, instead of the image, by simply, again, making it bigger in dimensions than the image. Now let's make one last change and enable the font display swap to our site. With the font display swap feature enabled, we're getting to an LCP score of 3 seconds and an overall score of 90. Not too bad considering we've started from 50. I think this shows that knowing what to look for and what to focus on can make a great impact on the performance of a site, even without making dramatic design changes. Great, so let's move on to our third tip today, which would be keeping your DOM ordered. DOM order is the way elements on your page's HTML document are ordered. Ideally, you want elements on this document to be ordered in the same way that they appear visually while the page is loaded. This is important both for accessibility, to make sure that assistive technologies such as screen readers and so on can read your page correctly, and also to prevent layout shifts. The browser prioritizes the load of elements based on their order in the DOM. So if the DOM order of a page is wrong, then elements might not load in the right order, resulting in pushing each other and moving things around as the page loads. This creates layout shift and high CLS score, which we want to avoid. Luckily, Wix automatically orders your DOM in most cases. However, if you manually move the order of elements in the layers panel, then their order might be wrong. To fix this, simply utilize the Reorganize DOM Order button we've introduced in the Studio Editor. You can get there from the Site Pages menu after clicking on the 3 dots icon of any page. If the button is grayed out, like in this example, great, your DOM is ordered and is correct. If it is not, click on it to fix the order, which will also overrun previous changes that you might have done to it. So keep that in mind as well. Amazing. So moving forward to our fourth tip today and getting close to wrapping it up. Our fourth tip would be using code right, or more accurately, using code with performance in mind. First tip would be that if you're using VeloCode on your site, try to make sure it is cacheable. The way cache works is that when one visitor is browsing a Wix site, it creates a cached version of it on our servers so that the next visitor can consume it. If you use VeloCode to uniquely customize the way that pages or song elements on them appear for a specific visitor, the cached version of those pages cannot be used by the next visitor. And so our system will mark such VeloCode as non-cacheable. For example, if you're using VeloCode to change a specific image on a page to a country flag, let's say based on the visitor's geolocation, then this VeloCode will not be cacheable. You can override this by manually enabling cache to those pages. We have such an option on the editor. But we do recommend using VeloCode in a way that does not interfere with caching as much as you can. Next, try to make sure that the code you're writing is lean and efficient as much as possible. For example, download only the fields you need, or store downloaded data instead of refreshing it, etc. We have an entire article on how to do that, so I won't dive too much into it. But lastly, the third tip would be that if you're adding custom code to your site, using the custom code section of your dashboard, please make sure that it is using the async or defer attributes, and preferably place it in the end of the HTML's body and not in the head. If you won't do that, then custom scripts that you're adding to your site might block it from rendering until they finish running. This will delay the loading of the entire page, and obviously we don't want that. Next, as we've mentioned many times throughout this webinar, you want to keep things light. The lighter a page is, the less the browser needs to render, and thus it will load faster. Simple as that. Try to split content between pages if you can. For example, if your homepage, if the homepage of your site already has an image gallery and a store gallery, and you consider also adding, say, a booking page, adding a button that says book now and redirects to a different page where Wix booking will be located might be a better idea than cramming everything together into the same page. Keep it light is true also when adding a large number of fonts to your page or of images or products to your gallery, a large number of scripts and applications to your page. You get the point. The fewer content your visitors' browser will have to download, the faster the page will load. And lastly, which also connect with our previous point, is to be aware of the trade-offs. And with that, I'll wrap it up. My goal here in this webinar is not to encourage you to create super minimal pages with barely any content on it, just so that some performance metrics will look good. No, my goal here is to provide you with the tools and information you need to be aware of, so that you'll know how to make educated decisions about your design. My goal is to make sure that you understand the trade-offs that some design patterns, such as using lots of elements, heavy coding, and so on, may have on your site's performance, and use this understanding to prioritize accordingly. Yes, it is definitely possible to create great-looking and fully functional websites with good performance. It depends on what you're trying to achieve, but it's not always the case, and it's not always so easy. I hope you find this webinar useful and that you'll now know how to make the decisions that works best for you, for your clients, and for your site's performance. Thank you very much. And we'll now have some time for questions, I think. Right, Yael?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're moving on to. Love them. Thank you so much. So we have some questions prepared, and we're just going to go through those right now. So the first question is, how is Wix Studio prioritizing core web vitals and performance?
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, I do want you to understand that we have a performance-first culture here at Wix. Every change that we're making to our system, every new element or tool or product that we're building will always have performance in mind. We will run tests to make sure that adding them to the sites will not hurt the performance of them. We also have automated tests that constantly tracking our infrastructure and our products to make sure that we never have degradations and we only go upwards. Another important point is that we're constantly researching and looking to embrace new technologies that can push us further. We have constant work with every product and infrastructure team at Wix to look for that small opportunities, that bits of code that we can reduce that will not need to be rendered on a page and will make it more efficiently, to slowly but surely improve the performance of the sites that you create with our platform. And I think it shows we managed to achieve dramatic improvements in the past few years, and we hope that this technique will continue to take us even further.
I was about to start talking without taking myself off mute. Oops. All right. Thank you, Otem. Another question. How is Wix optimizing images for better performance?
Cool. So I've mentioned some of it. I've mentioned that we are on the point that you are uploading an image to our platform. We are already compressing it with minimal quality loss to make sure that the image is as clean as possible and will load on the site as best as possible. We're also utilizing modern image formats such as WebP, and even if you upload a JPG or PNG file, we show it as a WebP on our on your site, because this is just much more efficient and a better image format. And lastly, what we do is, let's say that you upload a huge image, okay? And eventually you show only a small part of it, you crop it or something like that. We don't let your visitors download the entire image and then let the browser, like it can do, make those changes. On our own servers, we already make a pixel-perfect adjustment to the image, and then serve only what the visitor's browser really needs to show. This basically makes it so that you download less image files and lighter ones.
Right. Okay. So that definitely made a lot of sense to me. The next question we have is, why are Google Lighthouse scores different for desktop versus mobile?
Okay, so the simple answer is that mobile simulations, not only Lighthouse, but other other testing tools are doing it as well. They're trying to simulate a mid-end mobile device. To do so, what they do is emulate a slow 4G mobile connection most of the times, and they use not a high-end mobile device, but a mid-tier one or even a low-tier one, like the Moto G Power that we've mentioned before. So obviously, desktops on desktop that you don't have such throttling on Google Lighthouse, it will perform better. And when those kind of throttles apply, then the result, the score, the time it takes for the page to load is slower.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Otem. So we're about out of time for today, but thank you guys so much for joining. And of course, this is recorded, so you will be able to refer back to it. And thank you again for all of your questions in the Q&A. It was amazing. Wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for joining us. And there's, of course, we've shared in the chat also a feedback form. So feel free if you have some opinions, positive or negative. Everything is constructive for us. Feel free to share. Have yourselves a great rest of your day wherever you are. And thank you.
Thank you, everyone.